Now, if you finish this, you can watch the Jon Carpenter version and compare them. Well, don't compare them, just enjoy them together.
Well, too late, I'm already on it. If you were to ask me what my favorite scary movie is, I would probably tell you that I have no idea because there's too many good ones, but Jon Carpenter's The Thing is a definite high contender for me. His film is of course a remake of Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World, released in 1951, but it's more so a direct adaptation of the original horror novella Who Goes There, written by John W. Campbell Jr., than it is a proper remake. Nowadays, The Thing is regarded as Carpenter's masterpiece, a perfect movie that captures the themes of isolation, paranoia, and fear impeccably well, with a gorgeous cinematography from Dean Cundey, cinematographer of Jack and Jill. A haunting score from Ennio Morricone, and of course some of the best practical and visual effects ever made in a motion picture, thanks to Rob Bottin's impeccable work, as well as Stan Winston for this particular effect. To me, The Thing is a blend of perfection, where everything is in its right place for the movie to work. And yet, when it was originally released in the early 80s, it was qualified only as instant junk, a statement that didn't age all that well. It got bad press, put a stain on Carpenter's career from which he never fully recovered, and was considered nothing more than a gross-out movie in which teenagers can dare one another to watch the screen. Really makes your blood boil, doesn't it? Hell, Carpenter was even getting mocked by Letterman when promoting the movie before its release.
I would imagine kids will be lining up around the equator to see this one. Now, I noticed Paul looked away and people were gasping. That's a favorable response as far as you're concerned?
It's especially a shame knowing that the poor reception got Universal to fire Carpenter from the next project he was gonna do with them, and kind of took away his chance to be a big shot in Hollywood. Thankfully, Carpenter is now old and he doesn't give a shit anymore.
Fuck you!
But you can tell that he was very disappointed by this, and that he legitimately did not understand why people were so harsh with him.
The thing that disturbed me about it was that the fans turned out hating it so much.
At the time, I was a young guy. Look, it really shook me up.
The Thing was the biggest weird thing because the fans hated it. The fans thought I had raped the Madonna.
Of course, it's easy to get angry reading these pretty bad reviews so many years later, when everyone now realizes the many qualities that lie beneath the surface of The Thing. But just to try and be fair, let's observe the many reasons leading up to the very poor reception of this movie. Number 1, E.T. A lot of people, including Carpenter himself, blame Steven Spielberg's E.T. for the failure of The Thing.
I just don't think audiences in 1982 wanted to see that. They wanted to see E.T.
Since the story was about a cute, friendly alien that people connected with, it was the perfect sci-fi adventure movie for the whole family to enjoy in the summer. And then 2 weeks later, on June 25, comes this depressing story taking place in Antarctica, where the alien is a vicious monster that will essentially assimilate all life on Earth. I guess people were not too fond of that. Number 2, the violence and effects. I think it's fair to say that the effects in The Thing were pretty revolutionary. For once, instead of having a man in a costume awkwardly wandering around, they went crazy with a bunch of grotesque body horror effects that shocked its audience. Unfortunately, I think that the success of the practical effects overshadowed the story. People were just talking about how gross it was and forgetting the actual themes that Carpenter was going for. This is why I think that a statement like this,
the story is totally implausible, and the movie just basically is an excuse for this very gruesome and repellent creature to gross us out. It is the most nauseating thing I've ever seen on a movie screen, I think.
Is objectively wrong, since the intent was for the creature to be a tool in a very complex and human movie. Number 3, nihilism. This is a point similar to E.T. in the fact that people just wanted to have a good time at the movies, and they ended up seeing a story about the end of the world. Spoilers, the movie ends with the 2 last survivors just waiting to die in the cold. Carpenter said in the commentary track of the Blu-ray that he wanted to draw parallels with the disease of AIDS, and to have a realistic approach at the idea of fear and paranoia that was obviously very much present in the 80s. It was kind of his way of saying, no, everything's not gonna be alright. Maybe people felt it was too much of a downer and didn't like the reality of the film. Number 4, bad timing. This is a winter horror film that was released in June at the peak of summer. What the hell were you guys thinking? Number 5, nobody understood what the film was actually about and they're all a bunch of fucking idiots. Thankfully, many years later, arguably a little too late, The Thing grew in popularity thanks to home media releases and the film being played on cable, which led it to become a cult classic before being finally recognized by horror fans and cinephiles as being a legitimate masterpiece. Naturally, Universal became aware of Carpenter's recognizable and profitable movie, and coming off their success with the Dawn of the Dead remake, they had an illumination.
Money, money, money in my pocket. Money, money, I know how to count it.
But the producers of the film made it clear that Carpenter's movie was perfect and that there was no way to improve on it with a remake. So they instead opted to do a remake but call it a prequel. Genius. The two Thing movies have essentially the same story. It's about people in a research center who cross paths with a shape-shifting alien that can absorb and imitate other beings, like a dog or a human. This creates a vivid sense of paranoia, as everyone in the group could be the Thing, and nobody trusts each other anymore.
Nobody trusts anybody now.
It's kinda like going grocery shopping nowadays. A fucking living nightmare. So on paper, the films share a considerable amount of similarities, and this leads me to the main point of this video. I'd like to explore how two very similar ideas and concepts can lead to such different results in quality. So let's compare the two movies. Firstly, the prequel seemed doomed from the start, since the crew only had 3 months between the green light of the film and the shooting, compared to Carpenter, who had a full year of prep. This is a year of prep, and this is 3 months of prep. Yikes. While Carpenter took that time to make sure the characters of his movie would be meticulously realistic and charismatic, and that the creature effects would be better than any other movie, it seems obvious that the prequel crew rushed their movie to make a quick buck by having fan service and a recognizable name backing them up, with no real intent on expanding upon the original.
You've got to be real careful when you revisit material that has been loved. Only do it if there's something new to be done with it.
My thoughts exactly, so what was new about this one? The revolutionary CGI? We've got a milestone here. The problem with this prequel is that everything it copied from Carpenter's film is done worse, and everything new they tried to do was almost entirely bad. Although both films heavily focus on gore and paranoia, it seems like the producers of the 2011 film somehow really did not understand what made the '82 movie work so well, starting with its characters. Instead of going for realistic, everyday people like the characters from Carpenter's film, the creators of the Thing prequel instead opted for stereotype Hollywood cliché characters.
Do you really think that's a good idea?
Admittedly, The Thing had... well, no, I mean The Thing. Oh god, why did they have to name the prequel The Thing? Anyways, The Thing admittedly did not have the most interesting characters in terms of basic storytelling. Nobody had a specific backstory or much character development. They were all sort of just typical everyday men. What makes them much more interesting than the prequel though is 1, their authenticity, and 2, their moral ambiguity. The Thing really doesn't have any protagonist. Sure, MacReady is the main character because he's the one who survives the longest and with whom you spend the most time with, but he sure as hell ain't the good guy. He wasted a perfect glass of whiskey, and that's just a sin I can't forgive. Rest in peace. Similar to Alien, there is no action hero here to save the day, but instead a group of believable characters who all start losing their temper, until one of them steps up out of necessity to come up with a plan. Shut up! Take Wilford Brimley's character, Dr. Blair, for example, who discovers first that the Thing can assimilate people and could lead to the end of the world. Knowing this, he proceeds to destroy the vehicles, kill the dogs living with the crew, and destroy the radio to prevent anyone from escaping. He's even willing to kill everyone who goes against his will. I'll kill you! So perhaps Dr. Blair is doing this because he's the Thing and he doesn't want anyone to call for backup, or maybe he's just the sweet diabetes man we know and love,
Diabetes.
who's simply trying to prevent anyone from going back to civilization, since it could potentially cause the end of the world. This sense of mystery towards the focus of our main characters is a key element of the Thing that unfortunately was lacking in the Thing. God, this is confusing. Sure, the idea of paranoia and fear was explored, and this was arguably the best part of the film, but the creators are spoon-feeding their audience with obvious hints as to who you should trust and who you should want to see get killed. For example, there's this girl Juliet who at one point is getting sick after witnessing a very disgusting autopsy, so she rushes to the restroom, and then later on our main character Kate discovers a pool of blood in the same restroom. I wonder who could be the Thing. Who could it possibly be? It's her. Maybe It's this Juliet. guy? I Juliet don't know. is the thing. Oh god, it was Juliet. I really didn't see that one coming. What really bothers me is the fakeness of the characters. Kate is the obvious girl who knows it all and who you should clearly root for, but that makes it less interesting for me. You know she's not gonna become the thing, and that she'll make it till the end. In the Carpenter film, you had no idea if MacReady was the thing or not. You really could not trust anybody. There's also one of the worst characters in the movie, Dr. Sander, who's really just a cliche bad guy.
In the future, don't contradict me in front of those people again.
I just thought it.
You're not here to think.
It's painfully obvious that they just put him there so that you'd feel bad for Kate and root for her, which is just a cheap screenwriting trick, and to have somebody to hate and want to see get killed. And what's even worse is that you barely even see him die. What a great payoff. Giving him more layers would have been necessary, but no, they opted for just the most obvious bad guy who's mean to our protagonist and who values fame over human lives. In Carpenter's movie, the dialogue and character interactions feel so natural and genuine. These guys are just mundanely playing cards and playing pool, having a beer or two, and again, as unspecial as they are, you never feel like they're movie characters, which really helps with the realism and grittiness of the movie. You don't need obvious stereotypes in order to understand perfectly the personality and the characters from the '82 film. Very early on, you get to know how they think and how they act, like Clark, who's the loner who seems more comfortable around his dogs than around humans, or MacReady, of course, who loves to drink and doesn't give a shit about anything.
Cheating bitch.
In the prequel, there's the hero, there's the asshole, there's a lesser version of MacReady, and the rest is just a blank slate for me. Oh, who's this character? I wonder what his personality is. Oh, well. The characters are just there to add more body bags, but they didn't leave an impression at all. It's like staring at the color gray. Now, I've bitched an awful lot about these characters, but I will admit that I did like Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Joel Edgerton's performances. Their characters are underwritten and they could have been much better, but I really like the actors and they did a fine job to make you sort of kind of care about them. So yeah, the characters from the prequel aren't the Rob Zombie's Halloween type of unbearable, but they just feel completely mediocre, just like everything else in the film. Now, I couldn't go on without addressing the elephant in the room, the CGI.
They're making a prequel to The Thing, and it's a CG monster.
So there's a lot of speculation as to what the hell happened with the effects of the movie. On the commentary track, the producer mentions that they didn't have enough time to do everything practical, and that some of the effects they wanted simply couldn't have been doable without some digital trickery. Unfortunately though, it's pretty much been confirmed that everything actually had been made with practical effects, but the producer thought it would look dated and replaced it with CGI. The director seems to be genuinely sad about it.
Yeah, that was a shame that we had, at some points we had to replace it. But,
yeah.
And it's not because of ADI didn't do a good job, but we didn't just have enough time.
Yeah.
It's almost become a meme at this point. The visual effects are unforgivably bad, and whenever somebody mentions this prequel, it's pretty much guaranteed to be the main subject of discussion, especially seeing how great the effects actually could have been. But that being said though, I do not think that the bad CG is the reason why The Thing failed. The film gets a lot of shit for it, and very reasonably so, but there are plenty of movies that don't have great visual effects and that still can be very enjoyable. Was it awfully distracting and embarrassing? Yes, very much, and it did take me out of the movie for a bit. But the problems with the prequel go far beyond that. There's not much to say other than the fact that they did not know how to use digital effects properly, and instead decided to go for bigger and louder instead of using restraint.
And now everybody's talking about computers and the kind of super realism that we can achieve on the screen. It's all simply a tool. Because when you come down to it, what you need is a story.
It's just a tool to make movies. If you use it right, it can be great.
We did this all practical, but we felt that we hadn't we couldn't do too much with the practical stuff.
What the fuck?
We couldn't do too much with the practical stuff.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, it sure is. Everything's been said about the awful CGI in this film. There's nothing I can really add to this, but what I do want to focus on is the monster itself.
My favorite is obviously the psychological thriller, and I think that becomes more character-based versus like, oh, there's a thing, it's attacking people, there's gore. Oh, there's a thing, it's attacking people, there's gore.
My issue with the alien from the prequel is that it feels like a slasher villain, just killing people left and right. Sure, the Carpenter movie had plenty of gruesome death scenes, but the effects are the icing on the cake. The famous defibrillator scene had some amazing effects and a bunch of blood, but it especially works because you're already invested in the story and its characters. In this scene, MacReady took the lead, and he's now ready to kill people if they don't obey him. Clark can also be seen with a scalpel, waiting for an opening to kill MacReady and save his ass. The scene is already engaging. Anyone could do anything at any moment. There's a heavy focus on the characters and their interactions, and the monster is just yet another problem that they have to solve. There's a similar scene in the 2011 film where the monster reveals itself, but it simply doesn't have the same impact. This guy Edward is getting carried by two guys, and all of a sudden his arm becomes a little monster thing. And then Edward gives birth to a hentai tentacle that stabs a bunch of people while the arm thing is face fucking this guy. And then finally, the film gives us some fan service by showing how the two-faced creature from the first movie came to be.
It's pretty great.
Is the scene entertaining? I mean, sure. The CGI is awful, but it is fun to see a monster kill people. The thing though is that this is the only purpose of that scene: fill the quota of body bags and monsters. The creature showed itself for no apparent reason, knowing full well that it could have stayed hidden and wait for the group to split up. It already doesn't make any goddamn sense, and the monster reveal just sort of happens without any build up to it. When the scene ends, there's less people alive, but besides that, it really didn't do anything to progress the story.
What you need is a story to tell.
You see remnants of remains of the original characters you cared for.
Yep, those remains are definitely awesome. Looks great. The film tries so hard to impress with its special effects and keeps on showing the monster as much as possible, but the way it's lit and shown is just so awful. Look at how dark and mysterious the monsters are in the Carpenter film. Oftentimes you can't even see the whole thing, and there's a lot of very subtle little details, like the human head attached to this creature or the dog tongues. With better lighting, maybe the CGI wouldn't look as bad. Another thing that bothers me with the creature is the lack of diversity. In Carpenter's movie, the thing is constantly changing form, resembling a dog or a spider or a giant mouth. The designs are all very memorable and completely different from one another. In the 2011 film, it's always the same thing: a tentacle stabbing people, a big circular mouth with sharp teeth, the little hand thing, and the two-faced monster from the first film who's really just there to be a big dumb CG monster. You see so much of the same that it becomes very predictable and stops being scary. And bigger doesn't always mean better. Besides from the head monster, every other creature is big and loud.
It's pretty great.
Instead of opting for smaller and creepier designs, like the spider head, which is so memorable. All in all, the prequel delivered on the monsters and the kills, but it didn't seem to quite understand that sometimes using restraint can be better, and also that you need to have an engaging story in order to have your monster be interesting.
I don't mind seeing a movie where people are involved in some sort of violence, but you've got to have some sort of character content behind it. You got to care about the people. There should be a consequence for violence. A violent act should come with it some consequence for the people.
This is why, to me, scenes like this
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Are much more memorable than scenes like this.
Oh, there's a thing, it's attacking people.
If there's at least one thing that the prequel did right, it's understanding what made Carpenter's films so scary. The fake jump scares.
Jesus.
Yes, I loved the fake jump scares in the 82 movie. They were great. Seriously though, I will give credit where credit's due. The 2011 thing has some decent atmosphere, and it does build some tension by using themes of paranoia and distrust. The idea of having Norwegians and Americans also helped, since our hero sometimes couldn't understand what the others were saying, which adds a little extra layer of tension.
What?
Although it is just a rehash of what we've seen in the Carpenter film, not much innovation here, it was still my favorite part of the movie. I didn't give a shit about anyone, but I was biting my nails in a couple scenes. Yuck. But again, the execution is far from being as good as the original, unfortunately. Like I said, the defibrillator scene was great because there already were many different elements of conflict. This is constant throughout the Carpenter film. Sure, there's a scary monster, but there's always a secondary source of tension, like Clark holding a scalpel. The greatest example is of course the blood test scene. MacReady has a theory that the blood of the monster would react if he put a heated piece of wire on it, and so he takes a blood sample of everyone and verifies them one by one to find out who's human and who isn't. Again, there's multiple sources of conflict here. Firstly, Clark finally makes his move on MacReady and gets shot in the fucking head. This cranks up the palpable tension. Everybody's on edge, including the audience. Nobody knows if MacReady has gone completely insane, if he's a thing, or if he's actually got a decent plan. Then, while testing the blood samples, MacReady starts accusing Gary, and he seems certain that he's a thing.
You were the only one that could have got to that blood. will do you last.
Our attention moves from the blood test to these two characters, and we start to wonder if MacReady isn't right, and when you least expect it, the jump scare happens. It's one of the best examples of how to build tension in a scene. No matter how many times you've seen it, it's always as effective. Now, The Thing prequel attempted to have their own version of the blood test scene by having Kate find out that the Thing can't replicate inorganic material. So she asks everyone to open their mouths to check for dental fillings. Firstly, this is just a cheap ripoff of Carpenter's movie. It feels like we've seen it already, and I wish they could have done something a little more original. And also, the scene doesn't go anywhere. It literally leads to nothing.
As a fan, you think, okay, it's the blood test scene, and somebody will pop open. But actually, we don't, which is actually better.
So it's better to have a tension-filled scene that has zero payoff? I mean, why? It feels like they just put a fan service scene that would remind you of the other movie, without really having in mind what the scene would actually do to the plot, and more importantly, how it would affect the characters. No, the scene just ends. There is no sense of genuine tension, like everyone is about to kill each other to save their ass. Ultimately, the scene ends up feeling boring and useless. Now, the last thing I want to address for this point is the claustrophobia. In the Carpenter movie, the characters have been isolated in the same place with the same people for a very long time, without being able to go anywhere. Funny, that reminds me of something.
It's like a virus. So what do we do with any virus?
Quarantine.
Yeah, tell me about it. Before the Thing starts killing people, the group already feels tired and short-tempered.
Knowles, will you turn that crap down? I'm trying to get some sleep.
The group is exhausted, and this adds a lot to the heavy feeling of fear and anger. With the prequel, although everybody's on edge and paranoid, it still just doesn't feel quite as real as the '82 film. That being said, the tension was still my favorite aspect of the prequel, especially when they're subtle about it, like in this scene where you can visually see the characters starting to suspect one another. In summary, The Thing prequel is a rehashed version of Carpenter's classic. As much as they try to convince people that they really wanted to make the film their own, that's just not true.
You want to make your own film and sort of do something completely different than the original while paying homage to it at the same time.
We didn't want to remake the movie. We wanted to make a movie that fit in the universe as a companion.
Yeah, totally new and different movie altogether. This is all completely new and original. You could barely even tell that the two movies are connected. It's evident that the film was a cash grab to make profit out of a popular title, where everything feels dumbed down. The monster is bigger and badder, and we have a protagonist to care about, we have more explosions, and we have a happy ending where she made it alive. It's less about a group of realistic people all losing their minds and bringing the audience with them on this journey of fear and paranoia, and more so about a killer monster murdering people here and there. That doesn't mean that the film is completely horrible, though. It does have its moments, and I'll admit that I was entertained by watching it. There's some fun sequences, and the atmosphere is great. In fact, I think The Thing prequel is much better than the average typical monster movies that we usually get. But the reason why it's such a letdown for most people is that it's a prequel to one of the greatest movies ever made. It was pretty much impossible to make something as good, and despite doing a pretty decent job for the most part, it was bound to be a disappointment. With a budget of $38 million, the film only made back about $30 million and was received with an overall negative reception. This was the director's first movie, and it's unfortunately the only feature-length film he ever made, which is kinda sad. He looks like a really great guy, and you can see that he had some potential. So The Thing prequel isn't a case of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, just a horrible film that absolutely nobody cared about making, but it's also not a case of the Suspiria remake, which took elements from the original material and did something completely different with it. It falls right in the middle as a mediocre film that most people forgot about. And this ultimately leads me to a conclusion that may shock you. Now bear with me. I think The Thing prequel from 2011 was, in the end, unnecessary.
What?
What you say?
So those were my thoughts on the two Thing films, and in case you're wondering, I thought the Howard Hawks film was also pretty good. I definitely recommend it. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these films and what I should review next. And if you've enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe, it really helps out a lot. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep watching horror movies, it's good for your health. Bye bye.